Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you came to join us today, and I encourage you to put your name and your organization and location in the chat so we get a sense of where everyone's coming from. So I'm Bruce Goldstein. I'm Executive Director of the Transformations Community, and this is our third session in our workshop series on transformative AI tools and the future of our work. So in our last session, we explored how AI tools like Harmonica, which we'll be demoing actually later again in this session, may reshape how we engage with partners and stakeholders. And today we're taking a different angle on the dimensions of our practice as transformations practitioners. So we're going to focus on NotebookLM and its implications for how we generate, organize, and share knowledge. So this session isn't a tech demo, although there's elements of that, but it's more of an inquiry into how AI is being woven into research and publishing. So we'll consider whether it's enhancing our potential to do our work or subtly narrowing our creativity and agency and ways of knowing. So I'm joined by our project coordinator, Haley Fitzpatrick, and our three AI fellows, Ramaz Mohammed, Matthew Betlich, and Utkarsh Prajapati, who will guide today's discussion and demo. So our whole team is here to support. And so this is not a presentation, but a space for shared exploration. So feel free to use the Zoom chat for any questions or reflections you have, and we'll try to weave them into the conversation. So let's dive in. Next slide, please. So if you're new to the Transformations Community, we're a global network of researchers and practitioners, and we work at the intersection of science, practice, and systems change. So we co-create spaces for learning and experimentation, and we like to say we operate under the guise of 4 T's, and that's transdisciplinarity, translocalism, communities, but multiple communities connected, transformative learning, and the idea of temperance, which is about a pluralism in knowledge and method and practice. So since 2013, we've hosted 6 international conferences, and most recently in York, and we're coming up next month to our next conference in Johannesburg. Hope to see you there. So this webinar is part of our ongoing exploration of what it means to bring powerful and emerging AI tools into a community, our community, rooted in reflexivity, relationships, and diverse ways of knowing. So Haley, I don't know if you can pop our website into chat.
Yeah,
I encourage you to take a look at it.
Just put it in the link.
And we've got a number of resources there on sort of ethical frameworks and previous webinars and other stuff there to share on AI. So here's our next slide. So AI is quickly transforming how we write, work, and create knowledge. So it challenges traditional ideas of authorship. Are we still the creators if we use AI, or are we curators that are guiding machine outputs? It also raises questions about intellectual property, academic integrity, and accountability for errors. So if we choose to use these tools, and that's still a live question, we don't have to use these tools, how do we ensure they support deep inquiry, critical thinking, and transdisciplinary engagement across different knowledge types, rather than just reinforcing the biases that we're trying to fight against, corporate agendas, and diminish human judgment? So that's the tension between amplifying and automating human insight. It's the heart of today's conversation. Thanks, Scott. So next slide, please. So as AI becomes more embedded in how we research and publish, there's some critical questions that are coming into focus for us. Can these tools expand our capacity to think, inquire, and create? Or might they steer us toward oversimplified answers and uncritical synthesis and decisions that bypass nuance? So next slide. So in the transformations community, we see transdisciplinary research as the key to addressing complex social and ecological challenges. So we work across boundaries, we integrate ethics and systems thinking, and we value diverse knowledge traditions. So if that's our commitment as a community, how can we imagine AI in research and publishing not just as an efficiency tool, but as a force that shapes what knowledge matters, who gets to contribute, and how complexities engage? That's a tall order. So that's what we're here to do. So with that, I'll hand it over to Haley to walk us through what we'll be exploring in today's session.
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to explore these questions using NotebookLM. It's a very popular AI-powered research assistant designed to synthesize complex information from your specific source materials And unlike more general purpose chat bots like ChatGPT, NotebookLM allows you to upload multimedia documents such as PDFs, text files, videos, and then it will generate a visual, text, and audio summaries, making it, as Google claims, a more effective expert on your own research. So once again, Google is claiming that tens of thousands of schools and universities are using NotebookLM for various purposes, and research being a key focus. Some of the applications include the literature reviews. It can help identify key themes and gaps, generate data-driven policy briefs, visualize data, and can help draft research proposals by summarizing literature and suggesting questions. So maybe that sounds all too good to be true. So after we interact with NotebookLM in our first breakout activity, we're going to dive into the real critical discussion on what these tools really mean for research, and including limitations and implications of that, with our AI guest critic, Ollie Bream McIntosh, who's joining us today. So I'll hand it over to you, Ollie, just for a brief 1-minute introduction. Tell us a little bit about how your expertise connects with AI.
Hey, thanks, Haley, and great to be here with you today. Thank you for having me. As this little text here suggests, my focus is really on sustainability governance. I'm now doing a PhD, but for the last 8 to 10 years, I've been working kind of as a consultant or somewhere in different operations or organizations, that are at the intersection of sustainability or systems change or transformation, depending on who's framing it, and tech. Previously started looking at platforms and how platform dynamics and network dynamics can sort of facilitate how we do transformative work. And with the kind of AI boom, I think that the moment that brought us all to the questions that we're bringing today, began to be very interested in how AI can intersect in these things, and particularly with the question of sense making and governance, how we figure out what the problems are, how we share information about them, and how we begin to act on them. Often we know those are tasks that are really time intensive, labor intensive, sometimes even emotion intensive. And any way to sort of expedite that is really exciting. And that's kind of the first prompt that brought me to these questions. And I've been digging around in that space for a while. I'm happy to share any reflections with you today on that basis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ollie. We look forward to our discussions after the breakout room activity. Yeah, so now Ramaz is going to give a live demo of NotebookLM and showcase its key features and how it can support your research. And afterwards, we'll go into our first activity where you'll interact with the tool. Last week, we sent out an email asking you to share any sources around the inner transformations like reflexivity, well-being, shifting worldviews for sustainability, and just kind of using those to that complex topic to see how NotebookLM kind of handles those complexities, using its citation feature, AI chat, and mind maps. And then we'll reconvene to discuss our insights with Ollie, and then wrap up with a small group reflection in breakout rooms, and get a sneak peek into harmonica as well. So as you watch the demo, try to, notice not only what the tool can do, but also what it chooses to emphasize, and what gets foregrounded and what might get lost. So I'll hand it over to Ramaz then to take it away.
Thank you, Haley. Everyone, confirm they can see my screen with a thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, let's dig right into it. Hello, everyone. Big thanks to Haley and Bruce for setting the background. I'm Ramaz, a fellow from the AI Initiative. NotebookLM is, in simple terms, an AI agent that is built purely on the information that you provide, which means less hallucinations and less creativity, and more emphasis on understanding and inquiry. Meaning it's not going to search the internet for the answers to the questions you ask. It's just going to dive deep into the resources you've provided and respond based on those specific sources. So let's go ahead and ground this in an example. This is what you would see once you log into NotebookLM. It's the dashboard screen with the list of all your notebooks. This is a new feature they added last night. This wasn't there, not a feature, new section, featured notebooks. This wasn't there last night, but yeah, it's just a collection of public notebooks that you can access. But coming back to the demo, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. These are your notebooks, these are your projects, and I'm going to create a new notebook. This is the add sources screen. It's the first step in the creation of any notebook. It's where you are going to upload all your sources. It takes multiple formats of information, YouTube videos, websites, PDFs, documents, audio files, etc. I'm going to upload a few sources now. As Haley mentioned, we sent out a call for articles with the registration email. We've collected some of those articles, and I'm just going to add them now. Like for website links, you just paste in a dump of links, and it all gets imported, as you can see on the left here. This screen is the important screen that you would be engaging with as you use NotebookLM. On the left here, you have the sources. In the middle, you have the chat, which would be one way of engaging with the information you've uploaded. And on the right, you have the studio, which is basically different templates of engagement here. Great. The information is now inside. Again, a bit of rationale for the diversity in different kinds of and formats of sources. We want to ensure that NotebookLM can handle topics with nuance, multiple perspectives, power structures, etc., like that of inner transformations. Yep, the information is in. Clicking on any of the sources on your left sidebar would open a quick summary, as you see here, and you have a bunch of key topics that this, like the language model has generated based on its understanding of the specific source that you've uploaded. Below that, you would find the actual source itself. If it's a YouTube video, it's going to be a transcript. If it's an audio file, it's a transcript. If it's a PDF, it extracts that information from the PDF and adds it onto here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click one of these topics, let's say spirituality integration. So what NotebookLM does is that specific topic was found on one of the papers. It's taking that topic and it's going to inference it with all the other sources of information that you have uploaded to it. This brings you a cross-pollinated lens. Now that we have a response, you would notice there's a lot of numbers like citations. So one of the highlights of NotebookLM, as Google claims, is the citation feature does not hallucinate. So if you click on a citation, any claim, any part of a response, it's backed, and it leaves a paper trail to the specific area where it's drawing a specific claim or information from, which is super important for transparency in the age of large language models, making up sources, hallucinating documents just to satisfy your requests. Once you're familiar, you can also start asking questions, either to summarize, help you in your understanding, or inquire. I am going to ask a question that is not likely explored in any of these sources, which is, I'm just going to ask, what does this mean for a transdisciplinary sustainability transformations researcher, which I have felt on going through these resources that this lens isn't covered. So, which, I believe it's necessary in understanding the discourse with the papers. Well, it gives you a response, takes some time to process this information with all the other sources and gives you a response. And here we go. This is a unique insight generated by a question that I deem to be useful, and I want to add this specific perspective to NotebookLM. So what I would do then is save to note, where this unique insight or perspective is saved as a note. And if I want to NotebookLM to process this information, the next time I ask questions, you can convert it to a source, where next time you ask a question, this perspective is also considered in that. Now I'm going to click through some of the templates here that NotebookLM has, including a mind map, which is super useful. It's taking some time to generate. While it's generating the mind map, I'd also like to show you a quick feature called Discover. if you want, if you don't have enough sources, if you want NotebookLM to return sources to you, you can just hit discover and type in your topic. And what it would do is it would go ahead and it'll search and return for sources it finds that are relevant to this topic, which you can then later add on to the project. Great, mind map's ready. So what NotebookLM does is creates a high-level overview broken down into a super expansive mind map, really. Like some of these have just one level of really deep, and like for certain topics you can drill super further. Like I'm a visual learner, and like I find this feature super useful for summarizing information and understanding different sources of information in a single space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these topics, and NotebookLM automatically queries that specific topic in the larger context of where it exists. And there we go. We have a response for that. Some interesting templates here is a study guide. I'm just going to click through a timeline, which it picks up any dates provided in the knowledge and in the sources and gives you a super tight timeline, a cast of characters, etc. There's a briefing document, and there's an FAQ that it generates, which is super helpful for understanding not one, but up to 50 different sources of information. There's also the audio overview deep dive discussion, which it basically generates a podcast based on your different sources. And that's mostly it for the demo. That's pretty much the basics. I hope you were able to catch up, but the best way is to get your hands dirty. And that's a perfect segue into the breakout rooms. As I mentioned earlier, we've uploaded a collection of diverse sources into different notebooks on inner transformations. We will explore these features that I introduced in the demo, the citation, the asking questions on the chat, and the mind map feature. After that, we'll have a few minutes to share initial reactions, what stood out, and any potential risks we might see. That being said, I'll pass it on to Haley to set up breakout rooms.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Ramaz. So I have opened the rooms now. You can feel free to join. I will be putting into the chat the instructions, and we will follow this along with each of our fellows. So have a wonderful breakout session.
Welcome back, everyone. And thank you for that first round. Yeah, that was... and that was the simple version, just the read-only version. Just having all the additional capacities. But I guess it's good to build on that. We had a lot of interesting questions in our group. So before we turn to Ollie's reflections, let's first hear a takeaway from each breakout room. So if you were the designated reporter in your room, I invite you to briefly share just about a minute or so on what do you see the potential in AI software like this, or this specifically for research, and where do you see the risks? So what's exciting you, but also what's concerning you about this based on the discussion that you heard? So maybe we'll start off with the group that I was in. Steve Waddell, over to you.
It strikes me that it would be more useful for people to simply reflect on what people wrote rather than me try to summarize. How about just sharing the page and have people look at that?
Sure, go ahead.
Whoops.
How about a compromise? Will you kind of summarize it on the fly for us?
Well, I can't because I haven't read through all the notes and reflected upon them.
Maybe we could.
We had an AI for that. Well, why don't I give you a chance to do that, Steve, and we'll go to another group and come back to you. So Haley, why don't we go over to your group?
Maybe Jessica, would you mind sharing our takeaways? That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So in our group, Utkarsh gave us a bit more of a demo, and then we had some discussions. I think the main highlights are the way that this can be quite a big time saver in terms of engaging with a lot of sources, and it can also help us to work in a more contained environment where we know what the sources are, rather than the open platforms like ChatGPT, where it's kind of a black box. So I think those are kind of, and then the lots of different features. I think I would say maybe those are the three kind of highlights: the fact that there are different ways of exploring one's information and sources. And then the questions, there were maybe two. I think the one question was kind of like, is this too good to be true? What's the catch? And then another question was around, what are the weaknesses of this kind of AI platform? We know about the hallucinations in something like ChatGPT. Do these platforms also hallucinate? And if so, how? And what does that look like? I think that was kind of in a nutshell what we covered.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ramaz, what about your group?
For our group, Ollie volunteered to make the notes, so maybe we can, Ollie, go ahead and share it along with the reflections.
Actually, why don't we hold on, Ali, and then we'll just hand the mic over to you, Ali, and you can kind of combine your reflections with your comments on the group chat. Does that sound good?
Good.
Okay, Steve, what about you? Back to you.
Well, I'm feeling resistant, just in terms of a process, because I think that people are all good thematic and analysts here, and I'm going to analyze it in a particular way. I shared the doc there, and I think that people can see it for themselves. I guess one of the reasons I'm resisting is that I think AI has a way of thinking about, of approaching analysis, and that's part of the question, whether us as a collection of minds is going to come up with something more creative or more valuable than just pumping it all into AI or one person, in the case you're pressing me to do, Bruce, for the results.
Okay, let's take a look at that document then, as you're suggesting. Yeah.
And share the screen, maybe?
I put in the link to it.
Okay. Yeah, I see looks like you got a lot of extensive thoughts here. Very cool.
Yeah, I just threw it on the screen in case you don't have a screen share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. All right.
Oh, great.
We're just kind of soaking in it right now. I think our idea was discussion, summary, and then we're going to turn it over to Ali, and he's going to both tell us what kind of questions and issues came up around risks and benefits in his group, and also more broadly, give us a kind of critical perspective on the technology. So, Ali, why don't I hand it over to you?
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. So to try and squeeze it into a minute, there were some really interesting reflections that were shared. I'm going to focus on the risks and ethical challenges bit, because I think there were some very interesting bits in there. One, there was a tension between whether it's looking internally at its sources exclusively, or whether it's sort of looking at its broader training data, or indeed the web at large. Right, so it can become quite inductive and limited, and take those sources as verbatim without any other contextual awareness if it's just looking at its sources. And that can be great because you're not then risking some of the reliability concerns that come with broader searches, but also you're then not exposing the outputs to anything else. So if those texts, for example, allude to one topic only once, only that framing of that topic is what it's got available to it, and it can't contextualize it. So we had the question of, is inner transformation really happening? Well, it says in the text that it is, so there's no ability to contextually reconcile that with the sense that, like, well, at large there are limitations to this and progress is slow. There is no mention of that in the text, so it's not said. There's also the question of ownership. I think it's quite interesting. Someone shared, I won't name names, but someone shared the sense of guilt, which I think a lot of us sometimes relate to when, if we're doing knowledge work in transformation, it's kind of our brains that we're being paid or valued to use. And if we're then deferring to AI, there's this question of, like, well, is that fair? Am I allowed to use these things? Is that cheating? And what are the limits? And different universities we can see are starting to try and to regulate on this, but they're late to the party, and it's ultimately impossible to regulate because you can only set guidelines. You can't stop people what they do in their spare time and how they produce their knowledge. There were a few other points in here about, I think there's also this sense of contextual awareness that it's not actually thinking. And we see this a lot with AI, especially in context of transformation, where we've got a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different agendas, institutional logics, worldviews, all coming together. And the bias that we have in training data typically tends to be, some people call it weird. So, like, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. Right? This acronym to sort of suggest a very specific group of political and social cultures that have produced the bulk of the training data that these things are using. It then means that those subtle biases and not so subtle biases are really impregnated in how it's dealing with, say, a cross-stakeholder dialogue where there's lots of sensitive issues on the table, and it's going to inadvertently be biasing, whether it's in content or even in tone or language, biasing the viewpoints of some stakeholders over others. So indigenous voices or indigenous modes of communicating might not be as valorized by the training data. So there's issues there. And I want to kind of then use that as a transition to some of my broader critiques that I should say at the beginning of this, though, that, like, I mean, well, actually, to check in, actually, Bruce, how long would you like me to speak for in this? Because there's obviously a lot to say about this. Just remind me of the timing there. Or Haley, sorry, in fact.
Yeah, we thought 15 minutes or so is max, and anything in that range will do.
Fantastic. Okay, well, in that case, I would like to actually speak about this question of responsibility, as it came up quite a bit in some form or another, whether it's responsible vis-a-vis a sense of guilt, trying to do the best thing. I don't want to be stealing AI's ideas. I want to be in integrity as a researcher or as a knowledge worker. And there's responsibility in terms of bias as well. What if I'm lifting outputs from a machine that's been fed information with racist undertones or overtones? What if I'm taking that and inadvertently then perpetuating those biases? So there's questions of responsibility refracting through this conversation. But what's funny is that when you talk about responsible AI, and indeed if you Google responsible AI, you'll find a wash of institutions and frameworks. But they all tend to talk about developers. Responsibility is generally the purview of the people that make these tools in the discourse, not ours. And I think that's a bit of a gap when we talk about this. And I think we've all got concerns as whether we're very novice users or people that use it every day. This sense of responsibility that we have. I see my video maybe freezing here a little bit. Sorry about that, if it does. The sense of responsibility that we have is really widely overlooked. And so I kind of want to talk about some thinking I've been doing recently on what a responsibility, sort of a list of responsible principles for the end user would be. And I think the first thing to start is kind of really what we're doing here is developing a critical literacy about this. Every time we have these questions, there are no answers. Sometimes even when they're pretty clear-cut things, we're not really sure. Like, the question of privacy with Google, we know big tech has violated its commitments to privacy many, many times in lots of different ways. So when they say we don't do anything with your data, we can take that at face value, or we can look at the long history of critical technology studies and understand that that's not always the case. So there is not even a clear answer there, maybe depending on how critical you want to be. But some of them are very philosophical questions. So there's really no clear answers at all. These are all the beginning of a longer conversation, which we need to do in a socialized way. So I think the first principle for me about what responsible use means in the context here is really having conversations, open-ended conversations and inquiry together. And some notes on this question of responsibility here as well. Yeah. Second, I think about tool selection. So we've spoken already that some of the, in my group we had this question of this is NotebookLM is kind of a RAG, RAG retrieval augmented generation. So this typically means that when we're typing into ChatGPT, for example, it's using all of its training data, extrapolating on the patterns that it's found and sort of cooked into its model, and spitting something out on that basis. Whereas a RAG is only looking at the text we put in, as we saw in our demo. There are different tools for different purposes, though, and we need to understand when do we want to only be looking at the tools that we put in, when do we want broader training data to be fed into its answers as well, and when do we want it to go out and scrape the whole of the internet, the current internet, bearing in mind training data is only a picture of most of the internet at one point in time, 2023 in the case of ChatGPT today. So understanding that there are different tools here and being responsible is understanding how each tool might suit tasks differently. Then I would say we've kind of got these principles in order here. I can share some resources later that help sort of reveal the structure I'm going through here. But the question of limits is also something I'd like to share. When is too much? Some people, for example, want to put a token limit on their amount of use to say, I'm going to write a 20,000 word journal article, and I'm only going to do this many ChatGPT searches in it, just to sort of help hack the tendency to default to something when it's easy and a task is complicated and stressful. I think we've all been probably, I don't know about you, but anyone that's worked in academia or any writing can sometimes feel the stress of a deadline, and you can smell the urge to sometimes cut a corner or two, because it just needs to get out there. Whether that's in a single paragraph or in a larger way. In those moments, knowledge workers are often increasingly having to resist the urge to sort of do the easier thing and go to ChatGPT and claim work as their own. So setting harsher limits there can be one way that people try and sort of somehow self-regulate themselves. But I think limits has got a broader question here, and there's three questions that some of the people I'm working with at the moment like to ask. When you are wondering, should I use AI? Is now a good time to use AI, whether it's NotebookLM or ChatGPT or another tool? And those three questions are, is this really safe? We've spoken about the risk of sensitive data already. That came through in the chat a little bit here, I noticed. Sometimes when we're working in transformation or in academia related to questions of transformation, we're dealing with really sensitive data, experiences of someone's pain, whether it's personal data in a sort of just like their name and their details, or indeed, quite sensitive personal information about how they feel about something, their politics. Is it really safe to be using these in a tool? Could someone else's information be kind of accidentally cross-pollinated into another, and aspects of someone else's account be revealed inadvertently? There's also the question of safety around if we're encouraging it to be used in knowledge work, when it provides suggestions or advice. Sometimes we can just be like, oh, that's a great idea, cool, thanks, and not be critically checking, wait, where did this come from? What context is this lacking? How is this knowledge isolated from its origins or its complexities? And has anything here been simplified? So there is sometimes a risk of unsafe use just from taking something and running with it. Second question is this really beneficial? Right, a lot of the time, people might be using ChatGPT to ask what time their local pharmacy closes, or for a recipe. A lot of the time, Google can do that. And depending on who you're asking, Google is using 30, 35 times less energy per search than a ChatGPT entry, for example. That data is hard to actually do. So there's a group called Hugging Face, with a machine learning community online. They've tried to do a lot of work on compiling the environmental impact of AI. And it's really hard, mostly because companies aren't disclosing how much they're using. So there's a lot of guesswork, and there's a lot of changeability in that data, which makes it very tricky to estimate. So when people say, it's like one ChatGPT search takes like one bottle of water, well, it really depends. But the question that we should be sort of grounding ourselves in is there's a high problem of water use, of mineral use, specifically of energy use, especially in the cooling of the data centers that are used for this. Already just in the US, the cooling of data centers data centers in general related to AI is using as much energy as the aviation industry. So regardless of some of the discrepancies and ambiguities around this data, it's a major environmental problem. So is it really beneficial to be using AI when we could be using something else with those environmental corollaries in mind? Often not. Often Google will just do as well. Often a bit of personal reflection will do as well. Often a chat with a friend will do as well, or reading an old-fashioned book. And sometimes actually remembering those limits and asking, we're not getting any real extra benefit here. We're just defaulting to the easy thing, is one thing. The final thing is this really... sorry, I was referring there to the question, is this really necessary, right? The third question, is this really beneficial, is understanding what AI is good at and what humans are good at and knowing the difference. And there's a lot of interesting work trying to answer the question, what is AI good at? And there's a lot of very heated scholarly debate about if it's good at anything or it's good at everything, or it really depends. I think my take on this, kind of having waded through some of the literature on this, is that AI really has one core capability, and that's inference or pattern extrapolation. Basically, you can look at the world, understand kind of what's going on, and not from any sort of actual sense of cognition, but just through a kind of a big data process of when you expose it to enough information, it can spot patterns, and those patterns can be predictably applied to the rest of the world. That's its core capability. But that capability can lead it to being able to do a lot of other things like analysis or synthesis or feedback, or to reconfigure content, or to offer skills in coding and programming, for example. These are kind of secondary capabilities. That's one part of the puzzle, is knowing what the capabilities are. And then from the work of someone called, including Jaron Lanier as well, but predominantly now I've forgotten his name. Bruce, I know you're familiar with his work. Not Delacroix, he's one of his colleagues, but he's at Penn State University, regardless. And he talks about the jagged, him and his colleagues talk about the jagged frontier between what AI is good at and what it's bad at. And it's really important that we're trying to develop an understanding of where that line is. So we've got this core capability of inference, and we've got these secondary capabilities of things that AI can be good at, but what happens when we're using it for things that it's not good at, which we often are? What's beyond that jagged frontier? And they've actually done a study where they've tried to nail down a bunch of things that AI is good at, and said when people in companies are using AI to do knowledge work for things that it's not in that set of capabilities, it's beyond the jagged frontier, not only does it not bring them any benefit, it actually undermines the value of human work. That's been a really consistent finding in their work as well. So when we're using AI for things that it's not actually good at, it's not just bad results, it's stopping us being good as well. So having a sense of where that jagged frontier is, which is also constantly moving, sorry about that, is really important work. Having an internal map of what kinds of skills are required by the work you want to do, and knowing which of those AI can be seen as competent at, and where it's not. And yes, Christopher, I think to your point here, that is really constantly changing. It is constantly learning. There are also really interesting conversations about whether some of those things that it's surprising us that it's able to do are that surprising. And there's also the question of hype as well. Like sometimes when we're really amazed by AI, and probably a lot of us here in this room have had that moment where you are exposed to a new tool and you go, holy wow, this is powerful. This is really doing amazing stuff. You begin an emotional relationship with this machine, one of being stunned or impressed. And that kind of sense of like godlike power can lead you to sometimes be less critical in the face of its, likely flaws. So there's issues with its ability to learn. But I think this question of the jagged frontier is a really helpful one. There are things that it's good at and things it's not, and we have to understand where that boundary is moving and trying to stay on the right side of it. But in the spirit of time, there's a bunch of these questions of responsibility that some of the conversations earlier were triggering, but I kind of want to try and actually wrap that up, because we could be all very responsible. We could follow to the letter a really strict framework about what responsibility means as knowledge workers in transformation, or as researchers in transformation spaces. The question is that enough? When we're talking, I think, about doing the role that the research and knowledge work can have in supporting processes of transformation, we are often struggling to find my point here, also navigating my notes here a little bit. But essentially, we can think of when we're doing work in a transformation space, we're using AI tools, and the AI tools come from a paradigm that our transformation work is trying to push against often, right? Those AI systems or tools or practices emerge from and reinforce a cultural economic paradigm that's pretty much we're all familiar but obsessed with productivity, with growth, transaction, optimization, getting things right, very certain kinds of knowledge. So we can use those tools for our purposes, but we have to be very conscious of what kind of worldviews we're reinforcing with those tools. And we're very aware in this room, right, that most of the crises we're facing, whether that's the climate and ecological breakdown, democratic backsliding, community disintegration, polarization, all of which are affecting each other, they don't stem from a failure to compute. Often they're stemming from a failure to relate, right? So we can't really expect responsibility of playing by the system's rules as well as we possibly can alone to elicit any grand transformation. Often we have to really change how we're actually looking at AI in the first place, how we understand knowledge, how we understand agency, and to transform our relationship with those tools in order for those tools to serve our transformational intent better, right? So this question of responsibility probably isn't enough. And so where that leaves me is and I think it's been touched on, at least in my room, or alluded to in some ways. People call it different things. I am using the term wisdom increasingly. So we can have responsible use. Sure, we stick by the rules. We are careful with what we put in. We ask, is it necessary? Is it safe? Is it beneficial? We ask all these questions. But we have to go beyond that. And I think if the destination, it might be a sense of wisdom. And we can have two looks at wisdom, I think, in the next minute or two. One is a sense of wisdom guided use of AI. So before we're asking that prompt, before we sit down with NotebookLM and we start trying to use it to work through inner transformation to sustainability, for example, we can approach it with wisdom. One key way that we do this is to try and understand how our relationship with machines has been pretty consistent in the last few hundred years. They are basically an extension of the slave mindset. They do what we want for us. This kind of colonial extractive relationship with technology produces real consequences in the world, and it kind of reinforces this paradigm of humans at the top of the pyramid, that we get to sort of own the world and boss it around. So if we're looking at not just transformational output, but also transformational use and coming to AI with wisdom, we can start to ask maybe what would it look like to treat AI more as a kind of relational partner, see its intelligence, yes, as machine, but more also as it has emerged from humans, right? It's reconfigured existing human social knowledge, and it's spat that back out. That the origin of that knowledge is also human. It is sure it's man-made, but it's also natural. It's also one of many nodes of intelligence in a reciprocal web of life. So what happens if we use that view instead? And we use this not as a tool to do what we say, but one other kind of intelligence that we can begin to interact with cooperatively. So that's maybe one approach to flip how we approach AI. But then one thing that I'm actually going to end now here with one piece from the wisdom guiding AI. So how can AI itself inspire us to act wisely, not just us to come to AI with wisdom, but the other end. And it's a piece that actually Steve Woodell, who's in the room here, I presented recently at a conference in March. Steve, you have to remind me. February, March sometime. And we were speaking about, we were sort of very excited about what AI can do for systems change work and systems theory and complexity. In particularly in this case in allocating capital to sustainability transformations, but it can apply very broadly. And Steve raised a very good challenge, which we've now given a name. So thank you, Steve. Unfortunately, it's not the Waddell dilemma. You'll be sad to know. But we've called it what we call the augmentability bias, which is essentially that, and where I'm going here with wisdom is attending to this bias, is that when a part of our work can be augmented by AI. So the kind of stuff we saw in the demo here, right? Like you can compile sources and it can extract information for them and present them back. That we used to do that work as human researchers. We used to do it slower, maybe more accurately, maybe with more nuance, but now we're augmenting that. What we're getting from that is like fact. Tell me what this source says. And it's concretely knowable because the source in fact did say something. And this is one kind of knowledge in our broader knowledge work. And we can, this is a controversial term sometimes, but we can call that masculinized versions of knowing, fact-based knowledge, often. Now, if we look at the process of our work as academics or transformations practitioners and zoom out, we can see that parts of it have this kind of knowledge. Sometimes we need to deal with facts and what happened, and this kind of more, let's call it masculinized analysis. But there are other parts of our work let's call them femininized kind of knowledge. That might be more relational, for example. I should clarify, I'm not suggesting these are either masculine or feminine, but they've been kind of culturally masculinized or feminized, to clarify. But so what happens when we've zoomed out and we've got really excited about this bit being augmented and this bit being augmented, this bit, all the masculinized parts of our knowledge work in transformation, we get excited about what we can do to them and how we can start to use NotebookLM here and ChatGPT there. In the process, what we're forgetting is that we're actually sidelining the other aspects of our work. We're having less discussion about how to innovate there. We're having less discussion about how to build capacity there. So I think being wisdom guiding AI is also to make sure that anytime we're taking its insights, is to knowing that, hang on a second, we've had a whole long conversation here about what AI can do to certain parts of our work. But there are certain messy, relational, care-based forms of knowing and working that are really important in transformations that AI can really not touch, at least yet. And we must be attending to those as well in the process. So I feel like I've gone on a whole thing here. I tried to weave in some of the points that were that raised in our session and that other folks shared. So to recap, kind of framing this idea of responsibility as a kind of a framework. There's a few things we can do to try and be more responsible when we put the locus of responsibility on us as users, and then kind of challenging that and saying, well, actually, sometimes that's not enough, and we can also be wise and look to more relational paradigms and spot biases. That's kind of the journey I wanted to take you on a little bit. I know it's a big info dump. I'm going to pause there, or stop there, in fact. But yeah, super happy to expand on any of that in more detail and share some resources as well.
Wow, thanks, Ollie. That's very thoughtful and extends us from the sort of practical, immediate use of this tool to the much broader implications of its use. And I'm sure all of us have a lot of ideas buzzing around in our heads right now. So our plan now is to give you a chance to just talk with a partner or two about some of these questions that are coming up for you, or insights that are coming up for you. And we have a few simple prompts for this next phase where we're going to send you into very small breakout groups to discuss with a partner. And then when we get back, we'll open it up for some general questions or general observations. So those questions are, so what are your main takeaways? What are you getting out of this? What from today's experience with NotebookLM? Are you excited about it? You're scared? You don't want to use it? You're afraid that it's going to ruin academic work or bias it, change it in some way? And if so, what practices or norms do we want to cultivate in our teams or institutions to responsibly use AI? So is there a way to manage this situation? Is it manageable? And finally, does this change about the way you think about using AI in research? Are there any new possibilities emerging from you? We're not only into critique here, we want practical use. We're a hands-on practitioner-based group. So are you thinking about different ways that you might use AI and how that might affect your work? So when we come back, I'll invite folks to share a few reflections in the Zoom chat, as well as through Vocal, and we'll see where we are then. So Haley, why don't you send us over to our small breakout groups?
Hello.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Yeah. So wow, that was rich. What a great conversation. So in the last 15 minutes or so, I invite you to share your reflections in chat, some things that came up for you. It'd be really useful. We'll be capturing these and sharing some summaries through our community. I know I felt that way too. Maybe too early.
Always too short.
Yeah. So in this, we got about 5-7 minutes or so. Haley's our timekeeper.
Yeah. Pretty short.
A few closing kind of reflections, things that are coming up for you, bubbling up, things that you're feeling kind of urgently, that are really hitting for you. So, if that describes you, please unmute and share a short insight, or reflection, or question, or worry comes up for you. 30 seconds or less. So let's just try to get a bunch of these in from your final breakout. So what struck you? What surprised you? And so once we have someone to start the conversation, I always appreciate that first starter. We can raise little electronic hands, and I'll manage the flow that way.
You can also
Steve,
put
I see your
thoughts in the Zoom chat too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thoughts in the Zoom chat. Appreciate that. Steve, go for it.
Well, I really appreciated the jagged edge concept of Ollie, and keeping in mind that the use of AI is very strongly promoted by people who have financial benefit in it being used. And so they aren't going to tell us about all the problems with it. And learning how to use it well is a good element in our approach. And the other thing is just to build on what Ollie was saying. Steve Snowden says that only 30% of what he learns is by reading something. He learns by talking with people and having the full emotional interaction, understanding what the words are and how people are speaking them, and reducing it to a recording or reducing knowledge to a recording or a transcript is just diminishes the richness of data.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, who else would like to jump in? Reflection, comment, take that idea forward.
Well, I'll just chime in one thing that I'm finding interesting and potentially useful, especially for those of us getting like age challenged with memory and stuff. But one way to kind of keep it pure in a way would be to feed in only your own journal articles. So I'm thinking like going back like 20 years and feeding in all my journal articles that I was first author on, and then asking it to sort of help me pull out themes or patterns or a trajectory to help me understand how what some of my key contributions are, or how my ideas have changed over time. And I'm partly thinking of doing this because I want to shift over to creative nonfiction and maybe do sort of a memoir about things I've learned along the way. And the fact is, I can't remember what I wrote 20 years ago. So I'm kind of excited about the potential for it to, and not taint it with other sources, but just strictly my own stuff. What have I helped me understand what I've said? I'm curious to see how that's going to go. So thank you.
I'd love to.
Really been really enlightening.
Thanks, Hannah. Anyone else have some comments?
I can't find my way to raise my hand at the moment. Just a couple of quick comments. I mean, the resource question constantly is raised and never gets really very well answered. And I think it is serious, especially as it's being utilized in so many ways that is not important and not useful. And I think we need to have a better discussion about this notion of choice. But I think the thing that leaves me here is this is really, at this moment, we're challenging the notion of knowledge and the Western prejudice of a very specific form of knowledge. And I like the concept of wisdom, which, I go back to the Greek's phronesis, which Aristotle made the same distinction, that life is based in a lot of choices that knowledge cannot answer. And what we've done is glorified in the university and other places a very specific form of knowledge that AI lends itself directly to. And I really think we need to go back into this notion of what do we gain in discussions? What is the face-to-face matter? What is both the personal relational aspect of this, and what is it to be in real human environments? Is it the same thing to think about an ocean and be an ocean? I mean, we've really lost a whole relational context with AI that I think we need to get those discussions going in a lot more places, because I work in a lot of organizations. They're not having these discussions. They're treating it as a fancy little tool that has no costs, basically, that answers questions and problems for them. And then when you actually look at it, it often is wrong. And even if we limited it to our own sources, that's only half of the problem. I mean, it's a different kind of limitation. We're not inventing things, but we're also not seeing things. So hallucinations is given away to a kind of amnesia. So I think there's a lot of questions here. The discussion here has been really useful. Ollie should be very commended for a quick synthesis of a very, very difficult and important topic.
Thanks, Dan. We've got time for one more. Carolyn?
Thank you. Just briefly, thinking about the lines of what you just said, Stan, I would like to add that I'm pondering about what it matters and how much what it matters, what kind of relationship I have to technology or a machine. And and that probably it matters more than I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point to end on. It matters more than we think. How do we get access to that? Maybe even the things that are embodied, as well as the things beyond our individual understanding. Appreciate that. So thank you to everyone who shared, and it's not too late to get some last thoughts in chat if something comes up for you. Before we wrap up, we want to take a few minutes. Actually, we're just going to give you this link since we don't have a few minutes. We'd like you to fill out a survey, like everyone always does, but we'd like you to use the collaborative tool that we demoed in our last workshop, Harmonica, which is an AI-driven tool, to ask you, what you got out of this session, what we could do differently, but also, especially for those of you who might not have been able to attend that, we have a recording on our website. But it's a really interesting tool because it's a semi-structured interviewing AI. So it's pretty incredible and also pretty scary in a way in taking something that we naturally assumed was a purely human activity and incorporating it into an AI. So Haley will put that link to the survey.
Put it in the chat.
Great. So click on that. We won't be doing it together, but after you log off, if you have a couple minutes, we'd appreciate you giving us some feedback. It's a really interesting tool to use too, and to think about using and think about the risks associated with it. We're right now in the midst of thinking about the next stage of our initiative. We're exploring how to bring these workshops to the next level. So we'd really love your feedback about how this initiative lands with you and what's valuable to you and where you think we should go. So this is kind of a live experiment for us. We're learning alongside of you both, how to support group learning and collective inquiry. So your reflections will inform our next steps. And also, if you're interested in getting more involved, whether that's in shaping future sessions or piloting tools or guiding us to resources or other communities that you may be involved with, the Transformations community really wants to connect with adjacent communities and create sort of cross-cutting relationships. Please drop a note in chat, and we're going to take a screenshot of that or reach out to Haley directly so we can follow up with you. And for those of you who will be there, join us in our next. We're doing a live session on AI at the TCESG conference in Johannesburg next month. We're going to be exploring AI tools for ethical and collaborative governance. And we'll hopefully capture that one on video. So if you can't make it to Joburg, you'll have a chance to watch that as well. So everyone, thank you for all being a part of today's session. If you have a moment, put one word in chat that captures, or a short phrase that captures where you're landing here, whether it's hopeful, challenged, confused, engaged, whatever lands for you. Be interesting kind of to see a word or two or a phrase that describes your feeling right now, your sort of collective feeling at this point. Yeah, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. I see them coming through now.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for being part of this session. Thank you, Haley and Ollie and our AI fellows, Ramaz, Matthew, and Utkarsh. So here at the TC, we really appreciate having the opportunity to explore the role of AI in our work together. So look forward to the next conversation. Thanks, everyone.